Hello. Hey, we're here doing something a little bit different. We're with filmmaker Conor O'Brien. Conor, maybe we could start by you telling us a little something about yourself.
Well, I'm from Ireland. I came over here in about 2009. I came over as an architect, just before just as the Irish economy was crashing. So I came over here. I worked for a year as an architect, and then I was on a one-year visa. And at the end of it, I made a short film called "No Country for Slow Men" because it was about zombies, fast zombies, and you can still find that on YouTube. You won't get those 15 minutes back, but it's made.
I can immediately make a parallel between zombies and a number of reenactors I know. So,
Ah, funny. But the fun, I guess, the excitement of making of filmmaking, and we knew nothing. We knew absolutely nothing. But we kind of worked out the fundamentals of filmmaking just by ourselves in terms of like how do you organize a project? How do you get people to do something? And I made that short film, and I was waiting for my permanent residency to come in, and when it did, I was like, I cannot go back to sitting at a desk. Like that's what architecture is. It's at a computer the vast majority of the time. And so I got the filmmaking bug hard. Like for me, I love being on set. I love the problem solving. I love the organization, the working with people. Like that's where I'm meant to be. I'm not meant to be sitting in a room in an office. So from there, I went into music videos and then film and TV on like proper shows, and like I was Directors Guild of Canada. I was an AD for that. But the workload of film and TV is it's very long. It can be like 60 to 80-hour days if you count in travel, especially if you're shooting somewhere like Hamilton. So I shifted into commercials eventually, and that's a much better work-life balance. And that's where I am now. I'm a first AD for commercials in Toronto.
excellent. Yeah, I can relate a little bit. I've been on some different film shoots, most recently the episode of Murdoch Mysteries where the
Yeah.
Murdoch went to a reenactment. And yes, those were some long days, especially
Mm-hmm.
cooking out in the sun. And
Oh yeah, and those woolen uniforms, my God. Mental. I've tried on one of those coats and like, how do you guys survive?
oh, you should have seen it. We had quite the extreme summer. We had two extreme heat weekends
Mhm.
with Fort George and Fort Erie this summer. So we've actually spent a lot of time working on trying to prevent the risk of heat stress, heat exhaustion, and recognizing early signs of it. So
Yeah.
knock on wood, we've had a good season with no serious incidents. So that's really
Mhm.
something in itself there. All right. You have some slides. I guess is probably your pitch deck, but maybe if you
Mhm.
can get those up, then we can use that as a bit of a backdrop as I ask the first couple of questions.
Sure.
Oh.
Okay. So yeah, the coward. I mean, funnily enough, it actually one of the kind of the starting things for the coward, and I'll tell about it in a second, is that it actually came from a day on set on the Ron James show where I met reenactors for the first time, and I was so impressed. Uh, and just because that was the first time I'd kind of seen British Army uniforms and all that kind of thing up close. So I'll get back to that in a moment, but I didn't want to forget that point. So you'll have to edit that, I'm sure. So the Coward is it's a short film. It's a narrative short film. It's set in the War of 1812, specifically in the Battle of Lundy's Lane. And it follows one man in the very front line of the battle as he kind of marches forwards and endures musket volleys and cannonball strikes on the men around him. And then finally a bayonet charge and he breaks and he runs. The story doesn't end there. I don't want to give it entirely away, but the basic idea is like that's the kind of the setup. And what he does after that is the rest of the film that I'll reveal, once I've actually made it. The main character is an Irishman. He's an immigrant. He's joined the British Army, specifically the Fencibles. I think I have the militia on our website, but it'll be the Fencibles. And he has this internal conflict between his homesickness for going back to Ireland and the terrible fear from being in a battle. And these two things are conflicting inside him. When he runs away, he abandons his best friend, and it's he has to make a decision. Does he go back to save his friend into the terror and the violence of a battle in the War of 1812, or does he keep running and try to get home in some way, some mad way? He's not thinking clearly. So it's about fear and it's about war and it's about redemption. And it's kind of there's another word there. It's about identity, and that's kind of a loaded word these days, and that's a word that can be taken and misused in certain ways. But within the narrative of the film, he has to decide his new identity. He has to decide, um, am I Canadian or am I Irish? And he'll never get back to Ireland, so he has to decide, if I run, I'm still Irish. If I stay and go back to the battle, I'm Canadian. And it's not that simplistic, but that's kind of what it boils down to. So the film is a kind of a microcosm, or the War of 1812 is rarely talked about in comparison to, say, the American War of Independence, where they talk about it so much down south, but we rarely talk about it up here. And I'm trying to avoid a film that is maybe too preachy. I want to talk about, say, the choices that we have, and often the choices that we make are really definitive choices in extreme situations, and the battle is a pretty extreme situation. So that's the general concept behind the film.
So I guess you kind of answered it, War of 1812, but did you have an interest in that conflict, that time period beyond? I think I will leave in your little bit about Ron James and experiencing reenactors, but
Mm.
the British Army of that time period, War of 1812 or the Napoleonic conflict, were um, built on destitute Irish people, right? That was where they did a lot of recruiting, that there were standalone Irish regiments, but pretty
Mm.
much every regiment, probably 20 to 30% of the men were Irish in
Exactly.
origin. So
Yeah, yeah, that's just the number I've seen as well, which I only learned like maybe 3, 4 years ago as part of research for this film. I'd never realized it was quite that quantity. And so then there's like I have this short film that I want to make, that I've already actually, I can say now I've actually shot day one, and we can talk about that later. But the intention is not to just make a short film and be done and dusted and move on to something else. I view this as the germ for something larger, and that would be a miniseries, because it's quite possible that I could I've built a narrative that follows this guy Kelly from Ireland to Canada, and the various people that he meets along the way, and then he goes back to Ireland. He gets some kind of a resolution, but in some way, shape, or form, he ends up at the Battle of Waterloo. So I have much bigger plans than just this short film. But part of that is driven by the fact that the basic historical reality that 30% of the British Army, 20 to 30%, were Irish. There was a lot of Irish people in various different theaters. And there are records of Irish people fighting in Canada and at Battle of Waterloo, um, just by hook or by crook. And I found that fascinating, that the British Army was so kind of dependent on Irish people, and yet Irish people were so subjugated by the British Army. And I don't mean this in a nationalist thing, that's just the history that we have. So I grew up in the south of Ireland, even when we had our own war of independence, and then after that we had a civil war. So the south of Ireland has always been very kind of Republican in the last 100 years. So I grew up with a strong sense of Irish history, and the various rebellions that had begun and been crushed, and how the British Army was part of that. But also, interestingly, how a lot of Irish fencibles and Irish militia were also part of that oppression, that they were kind of co-opted. And so there's this always been this conflict of where, you're Irish, so you must be anti-British, and yet there were so many Irish in the British Army. My own brother was a member of the Irish Guards in Iraq and Afghanistan. So there's a very strong history, even now, of Irish people going into the British Army. Nationalists would say no, you shouldn't, but I think there's reality. If you need to feed your family, you'll join something that pays.
yeah, that was a big part of it was destitute people, even people in England that they were recruiting. They were
Hmm.
uh, kind of victims of the start of the Industrial Revolution. You know, weaving went from being a cottage industry to large scale commercial operations, and all these weavers were pushed out of a job. You know, you had more commercial agricultural practices where they walled in or fenced in commons,
Hmm.
and then you know they couldn't have this subsistence lifestyle anymore. So out of sheer desperation, you know, they took the bounty to join the army. And then in Ireland, Cork was one of the big embarkation ports, you know, for
Hmm.
service overseas,
Hmm.
and regiments would do their recruiting through England and generally top up, you know, in Southern Ireland as they're getting ready to depart. So
Yeah, and I'm from County Cork. I'm from the north of County Cork, from Mitchelstown, and uh, the you don't like now you don't see a lot of like it's been 100 years since the Irish War of Independence, so there's been not erasure, but Irish like nationalist identity has kind of covered over a lot of things. There's as a little note at the entrance to our farm that I grew up on, the the walls that hold up the gate, like the gate entrance, there's these walls and they hold up a gate. Those walls are built from the stones of a local castle that was burnt down as part of I think the White Boy not rebellion, but this period of like kind of where Protestant landlords were regularly burnt out of their buildings. Actually, I think this might have happened after the War of Independence. And so there's parts there where the history of the British occupation of Ireland is still physically there, but in a different format, right? Like and we had a good landlord apparently. He was a very nice guy for what it was, but like, yeah, that's what's happened to that. So I grew up like every time I walked into the farm, I knew what the gate was built of. It was built of like the past British occupation of Ireland, like walking past the physical evidence of it. So I grew up with that, and also I think at one point there's a cottage on our farm that my dad grew up in, and I think we found pikes there from this was it the 1798 rebellion, like pike heads like stuffed into the straw into the thatch. So this has always been around me.
well, this took a turn I wasn't quite expecting, but
Yeah,
I
I
guess
know. See,
it
I'm
gives
a
us
total history nerd. That's the thing. It's like this
yeah.
isn't just a film. Like there's I've been like a complete history nerd since I don't know, age 10 or something like that. So maybe we should bring this back on track because you know
Well,
I
it
get
gives us
sidetracked
good
very easily on this
context
stuff.
as to the why, right? So the because
Yeah, exactly. I mean, to simplify the why is that I've always been interested in history. The thing that I've always really been interested in is the personal experience of history. So when I got into history and reading about like, wars and stuff like that, it was like the American Civil War and the movement of armies and the strategies and then at some point I got a lot more interested in why men fight. And then once I started to understand the actual violence of battle, I started to question like why stay? Why would you stay with all this death around you? And there's this wonderful podcast by Dan Carlin and called Hardcore History. And he has this great little anecdote about, not even an anecdote, but a little kind of like situation he sets up where he talks about the Persian Wars, not just bear with me, but where like Alexander the Great, he attacks Persia and he has these phalanxes and they're covered in bronze armor and all this stuff and they're fighting against Persian infantrymen who have like wicker, shields. And his setup was like if you're one of these Persian infantrymen and there's this wall of like iron and bronze coming at you and you've got your wicker shield and your little sword, like what's your plan? Like what do you intend to do? Like death is coming at you. And the Persians weren't cowards. They stood and fought for hours. And like, but there's this machine, this this like, and so it was fascinating for him, like, what would make somebody stay? And what is it that drives you? And there's discipline and but but really what it seems to boil down to over history is the people around you that you often, and discipline is absolutely part of it, but often soldiers don't want to, abandon their friends. I'm not trained in, I was never in the military. My brother was, and he talked about this as well to a degree. So that psychology of battle, what makes men fight? What makes men stand? What makes men kill? What makes men survive? That's I went from like the grand scale strategy of things down to like that individual experience. And so this short film is really about that one man trying to survive a battle and what would take for him to come back after he's broken and run. And yeah, I kind of just go from there. The description of what he endures is a fundamental part of the narrative.
All right, fascinating. So you have some slides. I'm wondering, maybe scroll through them. We don't have to spend a lot of time on them. But with the idea of someone watching the video at this point, they can press pause and read it in detail.
Mhm.
And then you said there's a link to this as well. I can put that in the video description. So
Yeah,
maybe
no.
just quickly sum up, what appears here.
So this is the log line synopsis. The basic pitch is like, how do I condense this entire film into something simple? And I have it there at the bottom. The Last of the Mohicans crossed with Saving Private Ryan. But I should be kind of maybe more specific. It's the opening scene of Saving Private Ryan, the beach assault, which actually a bunch of my high school friends were actually in those scenes because it was shot in Ireland. But I've always felt that the time period, the Napoleonic time period, is always very kind of like widescreen, and that they rarely talk about what it was like to be like in the ranks. But Saving Private Ryan did that. Saving Private Ryan is amazing, not just because as a film, but because you take a very simple journey from the boat all the way to the bunker, all the way to the top of the cliff, and then the story continues. But you never leave the side of Tom Hanks. You're always with him the whole time. So you're never like, I mean, there's a few cutaways to some machine gunners hitting them, but that pitch, Last of the Mohicans, for the historical kind of accuracy and the amount of work that Michael Mann went into that, and then Steven Spielberg's Saving Private Ryan for the sheer kind of like visceralness of it. Like I'll never forget that beach opening scene. It's one of the most remarkable pieces of filmmaking ever made, as far as I'm concerned.
It's absolutely terrifying because it draws you right into the scene, right? You feel
Yeah.
like you're there on the beach with him step by step. So,
Yeah, exactly. And that step by step is exactly it. And that there's a way I'm going to shoot this film is a fundamental kind of camera motivation, we call it. Like in film or TV production, we're like, what's motivating the camera? Why is it where it is? Why are we looking in this particular way? Why are we using this particular lens? Why are we shooting at this particular time of day? All these kind of questions, like what motivates us? Why? And so for me, the fundamental principle in this entire film is that I never leave the side of the main guy. We're never more than like an arm's breadth away from him. We don't go up on a crane. We never go higher than a man is standing, and we never go further away than he would be from other people. When he runs, we're still with him the whole time. And that intensity, which is what Spielberg did with Saving Private Ryan, said, "We're in the boat, right? We're in the landing craft. We land. We're still with him. He's there around the obstacles. We're still with him, like right there. His face occupies about a third of the film, a third of the frame, so many times." And so it means that we feel like I said, like we're right there. And other people have done, they have done D-Day, like the big red one that was done, but none of them to that kind of intensity. And for me, the Napoleonic era is never been kind of described in that manner. And the in Saving Private Ryan, you can see the bullets hitting the man, and when that terrible moment when the boats open and they're all getting hit, and it's like, and it's just awful. And the cannon shells and the mortars and the guys walking around, their stuff broken up. You never see any of that in Napoleonic era. I mean, in the Patriot, they have a little bit, but it's not. It's more like little kind of cutaways or little features. It's not the nature of experience in that battle. And this film is going to be very much about that. And a critical part of that would be the impact of cannonballs on the men around him. And that's something that I'll get into in a little bit.
All right. What's on the next slide?
So this is the story. I mean, we can hold it here, but it is pretty much what I described earlier. It's a battle. The guy is there. He's very immature, our guy, Kelly. He's immature and he hasn't really committed to Canada or what he's doing. And this battle brings that to a crisis point for him. And the marching, the musket volleys, cannonball hits, and then finally a bayonet charge. They cause him to break and run. And he runs and he flees to a river. He has a kind of a moment of introspection and he flashes back to Ireland and his childhood there. And it's a very kind of like subtle moment. But when he comes back out of his reverie, he realizes what he needs to do, and he returns. He goes back to the battle, but he is too late. He is too late, and I mean I've already given away more of the film than I really
As I
wanted. But
say,
I
now I
think
don't have to watch a movie.
yeah. But still, you don't know how it quite ends. So I'm just gonna hide that. So we don't know how it ends.
All right. As I said, someone could pause and read this if they want all the
Mhm.
details. So
Yeah,
if
there
you
we go.
carry on.
This talks about my intent, which is what I've been babbling about for the last little bit. Just there's one thing here that I don't mention, sorry, that I haven't mentioned, but I should really have an image here for it. Is that at one point in my 20s, I went to Paris, and actually I went with my wife at the time, my girlfriend, who became my wife, and we went to the French military museum, the Hotel des Invalides,
Yeah,
the French museum,
I've been there
where it has
myself. Yeah.
where it has the tomb of Napoleon and all of that. But it has that breastplate, the Cuirassiers breastplate, where there's a hole punched through it from a cannonball, like this from the Battle of Waterloo. And I think that was the moment where I really suddenly realized just what this is. Like, what is warfare in the Napoleonic era? It's absolutely brutal because it's a breastplate and you see it where there's a hole punched through one side, but then you see the hole punched through the other side, and you can put your fist through it. The hole is that big. And that was the first time I ever truly, I don't want to say understood, but got a sense of what these men were up against. Like they were having these, it was death flying at them constantly. And then you read more about it and it's like, well, you don't shoot, directly forward if you're a cannoneer. You shoot raking across the ranks so you can hit as many men as possible. So
Oh,
that
yeah.
that breastplate in the museum, like it's not just him that got hit, it's the guy behind him and the guy behind them. And it just goes on. And there's records of like I think it's the Battle of Eylau where there's like cannonballs taking out 40 men in one go, just plowing through the lines. And this went on for hours. It's like for hours. And they're
Yeah,
like crisscrossing things. And it's like, how do you stay?
and
Like, why
then
would you
and then
stay
and
with
then
that?
guess what? They will go from cannonballs and the style of firing. I think they called it grazing. So you
Mm.
almost shot it down to the ground, and then it would
Yeah.
go skipping across the ground at
Yeah.
man height, right? And
Yeah.
then as the opposing armies got closer, then they'd switch to canister or grape shot, and the
Yeah.
cannons would turn into gigantic shotguns, spewing out
And
hundreds
they
and
would keep
many.
marching. They would keep coming. It's like, oh
Yeah,
my God.
yeah, yeah. So I'll add that image as I do
Okay,
the
perfect. That's
editing.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And that's called just to call back. That's where like so many other films have failed. I feel like they've Saving Private Ryan is famous not just for its depiction, but because it showed what these men went through. Like nobody who watches that could have any doubt just how awful it was to storm the beaches. Like, and that wasn't even the bloodiest battle of the war. Like, and that was like not even more than, I don't know, a day. And you had battles in World War II that went on for days and were far worse. But that moment on that beach, that was hell. And for me, I want to show that in the Napoleonic era, that even though the War of 1812 is small, even though the fights and the battles that happened, they would barely merit like a footnote for like the continental battles. Oh, you had 3,000 men, fighting. It's like, yeah, that's a skirmish in Europe. right? That's like happening off somewhere else, and we don't really care. But it was decisive here, right? They're vital. But for the men in the middle of that, it doesn't matter if it's 30,000 or 3,000 or 300. If there's somebody firing cannonballs at you, that's pretty awful. And like I was saying, that in the Patriot, they show cannonballs hitting the guys, and then they kind of forget about it. And then after that, it's just bits and pieces, and it's more about, musket volleys and Mel Gibson being all, big and brave. But the cannonballs are hitting your men for like ages. Like even if it's like, I don't know, 1 hour of cannonballs, like that must feel like a long, long, long time. And
Long,
so in
long
the
before you're in musket range, absolutely. Yeah.
exactly, you have to endure this on the march up, and then some, and then after that, like you said, they switch to a canister or a grape shot, and then you get closer, and now you've got musket. So there's just layers of hell as you're marching forward. And so the coward intends to I intend to show that. I intend to show like as they're marching, men getting hit by cannonballs, not once, but continuously. As in the first 5, 6 minutes, it just goes, it's just happening around them. And then we get into musket volleys. And then we get into a bayonet charge, and that's a whole other description about, realism and stuff with that. But the sense of like that you're marching and then boom, the guy is just gone beside you and you keep marching and somebody steps into it, another guy's gone, and it's like you're next. Like the cannonball has hit the guy beside you, the cannonball has hit the guy on the other side. Like you're next. Like, but you got to keep walking, right? You got to keep going.
And meantime, there's a sergeant pushing someone into that
Uh,
hole, right? And
mm,
the line's slowly shrinking as you fill in the gaps. So,
yeah.
all right, what's next?
So these are the characters. So this is Kelly, being played by Sean Meldrum. And this is a description of, say, his backstory and the kind of character references from the various films. So we've got Padraig O'Sullivan from The Banshees of Inisherin, because he's a bit of a, there's a phrase in Ireland that he's a bit of a gombeen, or not even maybe a gombeen, but maybe there's a bad word I could use that I don't really want to use, but it's like a fool, like a bit of a silly fool. And then Chris from Platoon, he's not foolish, but he's very unaware, and he's very kind of like naive to the nature of the war that he's stepping into in Vietnam. And then in Barry Lyndon, I mean, he's a bit of a skiver, but he has elements of bravery in him. Like he does have elements, but he's also, again, immature. So this sense of like somebody who needs to go through a crisis point in life to become a man is another one of those fundamentals of the character. And this battle kind of like forces that upon him. He's not ready for it. He doesn't want it. He doesn't want to grow up, but this battle and what happens to it and what he does forces him into that, like decide like stay a child or become a man. And these three characters, I think, start touch on that in various aspects. The other aspect of this that's important is that this is an Irishman, and for the character, for me, he speaks Gaelic when he's growing up. Now, in Ireland, you would speak Gaelic, but to deal with like the authorities or anything, to do anything, and certainly once you got into the army, you spoke English. Like you learned English, that was it. So you ended up a lot of people who were, bilingual. And Kelly, like English is not a veneer, but it's on the surface. But in the battle, when he freaks out and he kind of falls apart, he reverts back to Gaelic, to his mother tongue. And it's one of those things where he's speaking kind of subconsciously or unconsciously. He's just verbalizing his emotions, but in the language that's instinctive to him. And that's what this quote is down here. It says, Beg to a bhaile go lua, teagarag makara totu beag na gan. And it's, you'll be home soon. Go on, my friend. You're nearly there. And there's a bit of a hint to the spoiler, to the story spoiler in there about what happens to his friend. So it's that sense of that there's an Irish identity, to touch back on that, that is another layer below. Just that there's the aspect of there's the layer of the experience of battle, and then there's the layer of maturing from a child to a man, and then there's the layer of identity, and that's tied back to those two other things. Like, am I Irish? Am I English? Am I Canadian? And that was, and like back then they didn't really have a sense of Canadian, right? So it's there's layers in this slide alone that I think if you ever see the final film and then you go back and and you see this slide again, be like, oh, I get it. Right now it's maybe a little too subtle, but it helps for me to kind of put it all in one place. So that's Kelly, the main guy, and he's wearing one of the uniforms from Fort York, from the Friends of Fort York, who very kindly lent them to us for this photo shoot.
Canadian Fencibles.
Yes, exactly. This is Mark Pettit. He'll be playing Matthews. And his character references are 1917 Lance Corporal Blake, the poor guy who dies, and then again the Patriot, Martin, and he's brave, right? He's more mature. He's more kind of like solid. He knows who he is. He's a small-time farmer in Ontario. He's defending his homeland. Like it's quite clear to him what his mission is, what his job is, what he needs to do. His feet are planted on the ground, whereas Kelly is a lot more loose. Kelly is not solid. He's left his home behind, whereas Matthews is in his home, even if he's not, specifically in his farm, whatever, he's in his homeland, right? And so that's what this kind of alludes to as well. And the idea of like in The Patriot, Gabriel Martin, he's the character, he's defending, against the British, or he's defending his home as he sees it. And of course, there's the Saving Private Ryan, where Ryan, like, he's offered the chance to leave, right? He's like, your brothers have died, and you're going home. And he's like, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not leaving these. I'm not leaving my family. Like his family are the soldiers around him. And that ties back to what I was saying previously about like what makes you stay and what would make you kind of stand and keep moving forward. And like discipline is absolutely a part of it. A big fearsome sergeant behind you is definitely a part of it, but also the guys around you. Like you're with them all day, every day, so they become your friends. They become your kind of ersatz family. And in Saving Private Ryan, that's absolutely why he stays, right? And so Kelly flees and he breaks and flees, but Matthews, he never will. And that's part of the tragedy of Matthews as well. Then this is Sergeant Pike, being played by Richard Veltri, and he's very much the kind of the grizzled veteran. He's English, but he's not like kind of. I've been careful to steer away from kind of cliches of like the bigoted Englishman who hates Irish lads, that kind of thing. For me, it's not about that. It's like in the uh, in the horror of like of a battle, I'm pretty sure that kind of identity goes out the window. It's like Sergeant Pike is a survivor. Like he is never going to die in battle, even if he's wounded or whatever. He is going to fight his way through hook or crook, but he doesn't forget his job. Like he wants to get his men through. He wants to get as many of them through as possible. And he's a professional. He's absolutely a professional. He's tough. He's strong. He's very clear-headed, and he never never buckles. Right? He never gets he absolutely gets scared, but he just falls back hard in his training, and he never bends. And he becomes a point later on in the narrative where the redcoats start to rally, and he's one of those anchor points. And that's one of those things that again goes back to discipline. It's like the discipline isn't just to move forward. It's like, well, if you see somebody being a leader, like even at the scale of a sergeant, then you're more likely to stay. And what is it? If everybody around you is losing their heads and you can keep yours, right? This guy, he'll always keep his head. He will never flake. And so he's the kind of the rock, I guess. And so yeah, it's the reference. I mean, Richard Sharp and Sharp's rifles, obviously, bastard, all those kind of guys. And I have a quote there: "I'm not getting killed by a farmer in a costume pretending to be a general. We fix bayonets or we die." And that kind of that attitude is like, I don't care if you outrank me. Like, I know what needs to be done. Like again, going back to the professional. And then this is Lieutenant Latimer, who is a bully. And also one of those things that I want to be careful with, where the whole kind of like lions led by donkeys kind of trope, and which isn't accurate, obviously. There was a lot of brave lieutenants and captains in the British Army, and but this guy is not so much that it's more that he's vainglorious. You know, like he's brave, but he's willing to spend other men's lives to get what he needs. And there's a social conflict there between himself and Sergeant Pike, where they both want to win, they both want to get through the battle, but Latimer is very much looking at the kind of the social aspect, like the spoils after the battle, whereas Pike is more focused on surviving right here and now and wants to maximize, how many men survive, whereas maybe Latimer is more focused on maximizing his success. And that is one of the conflicts in the narrative. Whereas we're not always just on Kelly. It was like these are happening around him, these small stories. And yeah, Encino Man from Generation Kill, if anybody's watched that, they'll know straight away the kind of mentality. And yeah, I'll trash you out of the regiment for that, Pike. It's like, yeah, there's some hard words said between them. And that kind of serves within the narrative as kind of like a misdirect, and that we're on Kelly, and then we're onto the argument between the two of these men, and then that causes tactical issues, and then the bayonet charges that they get hit by is a bit of a surprise because of this conflict between the men. With if there wasn't this argument, they would have been ready, but there is, so they aren't. Um, this is Boswell. He's the thief, if you see it there in the top left. So again, I'm trying to build this kind of like with Saving Private Ryan, where he has the group of men around him, and you get a sense of the different characters. And in Private Ryan, when they bring in the what was it, Opham, he's kind of you've already met the characters, but he's the one that brings you in unless you kind of see the relationships and kind of how everybody kind of like a web of how people know each other and what they've been through. And he's kind of the odd man out. And in this, for Boswell, he's like Pike. He's a survivor. He won't ever. He would get wounded. He does get wounded. We never see him die, but I guarantee you, he's not one of those men who'll just. He's the kind of guy who'll end up, you know, drunk on the streets of like London, destitute, whatever, with like selling off his last medal from the Battle of Waterloo, that kind of thing. But if you're in a fight in a battle, like he is absolutely the guy you want at your side. He is a killer, but he's very much on the lookout for himself. And so he has a little mini moment as well, as part of the narrative, and kind of a tragic moment, I guess. But his bravery, his kind of like very matter of fact bravery, like that kind of contrasts with, say, the kind of dramatics of Lieutenant Latimer, the kind of the the hard-bitten edge of Pike, and but Boswell, he is like so kind of practical, like enormously practical. It really doesn't matter what uniform he's wearing. He'll just shoot at whoever it is. If he's wearing blue, he'll shoot at red. If he's wearing red, he'll shoot at blue. Doesn't really matter to him. And Bunny from Platoon is a good reference in that if you need something dirty done, Boswell will be your guy. And he's played by David Walpole, who's excellent actually. He's very, very intense at that. He's very good. And it was, yeah, don't worry, Kelly, we won't let you die. You owe us all too much money. I've tried to not kind of within the script. There's little moments like this where it's not so much levity or humor, but like it's not all like kind of like tactics and death and killing and fighting and like there's these are people and
Yeah,
they
I
have
was gonna say human moments, eh? Like,
yes, exactly. So human
yeah.
moments, like in the middle of this battle, guys getting hit by cannonballs and blood and guts everywhere, and this guy is saying like, "We haven't forgotten you owe us money, Kelly. Like, this is going to end at some point, and you will still owe us money." So that kind of like again, practical, kind of like, nope, doesn't take his eye off the prize. You're gonna pay me back my few guineas. And so that's those main characters. As you can see, like this script and this film is very much focused on the British Army side of things. The American side, um, it's difficult to do that in a short film to kind of show things from both sides without kind of like falling between the two stools. So I decided early on to take one army, one side, and just focus on the people in that. And if I was to do a second film, I could, in theory, do the American side of the experience, and you could watch the two back to back and be like, oh, their
I'm
experience.
sorry, I'm reading ahead. I see Latimer's comeuppance there, so
Oh,
under prosthetics. So.
where is it? Oh, I see. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, yeah. So and that goes down to again, it's like I mean there's that moment in Saving Private Ryan where the guy you see the guy bend down and he picks up his own arm and it's like, oh God. And the guys go flying through the air and all of this kind of stuff. And there's the effects of the cannonballs on men is as I said earlier, like a critical component of the narrative. This is a feature, not a bug, right? It's going to take time to do this right, and it needs to be done correctly. And it's one of those things that I think will be technically difficult in many ways. But my background will allow me to do it properly, but with prep and time. But on film will look like nothing else anybody has seen about the Napoleonic era. Um, There's a TV series, Shogun, Emmy award winning. It's fantastic, and I actually got to talk to the VFX supervisor for it. But there's an episode in that that shows the effects of cannonballs hitting groups of men, and it's incredible. Like it's like incredibly well done, but also incredible for like how realistic it is for the sheer amount of like blood and guts that goes flying. And that's kind of a spread out group of men in that scene. The guys are right here, and it's happening constantly. And like we were saying earlier, one guy goes down and we show that, and another guy has to step in. And also there's a shot in the film where we look along the line and you see the cannonballs kind of like just going chop, 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 chop through the line as the men are marching forward or as they're firing. So you get that sense of like cannonballs carving through groups of men and arms and heads and stuff going flying. And I feel that this is important because it's such a scary idea to me that for Kelly to break, he cannot just be scared of something. We have to layer in the fear. And for us to understand why he breaks and kind of empathize with why he breaks, we need to show just what he's up against. And he's up against cannonballs punching through men. He's up against musket fire. He's up against bayonets. And at some point, you're like, you know what, dude? You should run. This is nuts. You should go. Like, get out. I don't want it to be like he's a cowardly person. I want it to be like he has been terrified beyond reason by the events surrounding him. And those events are cannon fire on the men around him. So yeah, and again, it's just it'll all be there's a lot of this is more about the production side of things, like as I was saying about the cameras and VFX and stunts will be very heavy in this. So this is not a this is not a cheap shoot. I could easily have done something like, three guys in a forest and they hear the battle off screen and they're talking about, being scared and there's a few musket shots and you see a few and it's like all of that that's fine, but it's just kind of I don't know. There's something about being constrained in the group. If you can't leave and things are violent, then it's inherently more scary. If you can flee, if you're in a forest, well, there's places to hide, right? You can run. Simple as that. But if you can't run, the fear is magnified. And that's where Saving Private Ryan comes in. It's like, where are you going to run, guys? The ocean's there. Like, where are you going? You have to go up the beach. And Tom Hanks basically says that. It's like we have no option. We go forward. And you're going forward into worse and worse and worse kind of death. And so if you're in the line of men, and you can't leave that because there's a surgeon behind you because it's more dangerous, whatever, then I think the terror and the intensity of it is just magnified. If it's just a few guys in a forest or in a, standing guard or something like that, well, it's just kind of lame. I've seen that film. I've made that film for other people. It's like, no, this needs to be claustrophobic. And you don't have to be in a room to get claustrophobia. You can just not be able to leave where you are. And I think that's what the cannonballs hitting the guys and the proximity of everything and never being further than a hand away from the main characters. I think that'll give a good sense of being stuck in the middle of something awful.
All right. Is there any more slides? I'm
Oh,
mindful
there.
of time too and
Yeah,
trying to
sorry. So this is
keep.
the reenactors, and this can call back to what I was saying about the Ron James show and that. Like, I mean, for me as an assistant director, reenactors are amazing. Like you guys, you turn up on set and like I don't know, you're already dressed in the car park. You come in as a group, and like for ADs, we don't, we talk to the sergeants, and you guys organize. You're like an AD's dream in terms of like how to pull this off. It's just amazing because
That was our experience on Murdoch. I think it was AD saying, like, you guys are incredible. Like,
yeah,
always
oh
on
yeah,
time. Like you follow instructions.
your
Like,
uniforms are perfect.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I did a lot of days on Murdoch years ago, and like I know that show well. And I like it's a period drama, so like they know what they're doing over there, you know. So, but even then, to have these men turn up and like how many did you guys have for that episode? It was like maybe 50 reenactors.
50, 60 in that range, yes.
Yeah, and that's large. And then again, you all come with your props.
Yeah.
You come with your props, everything's perfect. And you march, you move around. It's like if there is no way I could pull off this film. And there's no way I could have even like gone near the idea of doing it without the knowledge and the experience of what reenactors can do. And you guys can literally look and act the part of a unit from that time period flawlessly. And you can move. And that's the thing, like the movement of men on film really tells you a lot about like how authentic it is. In Saving Private Ryan, like we see them fighting, like they spend weeks and weeks training those guys. And it was the same for The Last of the Mohicans, that incredible battle towards the end where the column of Redcoats gets ambushed from both sides. And they spent like a month shooting that. And
Yeah.
they had to train so many people, right? And they had to
You
do
referenced Generation Kill or Encino
yeah.
Man, but I remember watching some of the background on that series, and they had a Marine boot camp for all the
Yeah,
actors, and
exactly.
they had real Marines who were part of those units they were depicting. So
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And even simple things like in was it Band of Brothers where they're all training, but then they bring in what's his name? The guy who plays Captain Sobel. But they bring him in like later on. So the group has been training together of the actors. They've kind of like bonded, and then they literally drop in this actor who is his character is to feel very kind of like separate. And so that aspect of how training binds people together is very important for me. The actors for this film will be doing well, I don't think we'll be doing 3 weeks of boot camp, but they'll definitely be rehearsals with reenactors, with the full use, like marching in time, um, ha weapons handling correctly, firing volleys, listening to commands, looking like part of the unit. I don't want them to look like we have actors and reenactors, right? They've all got to look together. So that binding of them into as one whole will be very important. And it's also, I think, easier for actors because they have the reference point of these reenactors beside them doing everything right. And they'll be the left and right, and you guys are great. You're just constantly correcting and checking each other because the fixation, and it is a fixation, but in a positive way, on accuracy is very admirable. I think it's great, and this film would not be possible without that. Which is why I've connected with the was it Thompson's Company of the Second York Militia with Greg Carrero. So they'll be our reenactors for this. We'll dress them as defensibles, but the having that body of men to rely on who'll make it look right simply because that's what they do. I wouldn't be able to make this film without that for sure.
yeah, and they're a younger unit, right? And so that's going to give you the
Mhm.
right look and feel, for the authentic
Yeah, exactly.
perspective.
Yeah,
So
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So yeah, these are this image is very good. This slide here, because if on the top right there we show these four soldiers in the British Army, and I think that those are like soldiers around like the Peninsular War or something like that. But that illustration of how kind of dirty and disheveled they are, I mean, I don't think we'd be going quite to that level. These guys are like at the very end of their tether, I think, in terms of look. But the this is not a parade shoot. Like this is not Barry Lyndon's, perfectly clean guys marching forward into like across a manicured lawn. Like it's none of that. This is grit. This is the Saving Private Ryan aspect, and the practicality of they've got their gear, and the gear is not parade gear. It's marching gear. It's campaign gear. It's killing gear. Like this, these are men in battle, and the grime and the dirt. Like that's a very important thing for me. And then as contrast, you can see the images down below, and that's literally like nice clean uniforms. So there'll be cleaning fees for sure
Mm.
with all of this. But actually, in addition to this, there's a photographer, and he did this series of images called Waterloo Uncovered, and I have the book actually. Yeah, I'm actually gonna grab it. And he went to the battle of the 250th, I think, anniversary of Waterloo. He was there, and he set up a like a I'm not sure a booth or whatever. I know you were there, Tom, but I don't
Yeah.
know if you saw this. But he was photographing reenactors at the end of the day as they were marching, like as they were done. So he got them covered in grime and sweat and dust and dirt and gunpowder and all that kind of stuff. And the images are fantastic. I don't know if you want to. Maybe I'll show this at the end, but
Yeah,
these.
you can stop sharing screen and that gives you an
Yeah,
opportunity to
I'll
show
just
that.
stop there for
So
a sec there now. But so I got it. It was not cheap, I'll tell you. But it's this lovely book, and I gotta be careful. But he has these wonderful illustrations, not illustrations, but photographs.
yeah,
Um,
I've seen a lot of the images posted
yeah,
online.
yeah,
So,
like
yeah.
that's a great one. And these are all like just the characters, right? And you can see the dirt, and they're not. These are worn down. These are tired guys at the end of a day of reenacting, and these are all dirt, of course. But that sense of like very mundane, right? Like this is not parade. This is work, right?
Yeah.
And no, there's a fancy one. And that's kind of like the worn aspect to them, like the dirt. Like this guy was perfectly clean at the start of the day, but now look at him. He's not. He is a dirty fellow.
Or he might have been clean 2 or 3 days prior, but they've been
Yeah,
marching, sleeping in barns, sleeping under trees and orchards and stuff
yeah,
like that, right? So
yeah. Okay, so you should. So there it is. You see this now again? We're back to this.
yep, yep,
Figure. So yeah, so that aspect of like the realism of it is important to me as well, which I think is one of the when you think about Saving Private Ryan and say the big red one, like that was black and white for sure, but still there was this kind of like cleanness to it, whereas Saving Private Ryan, like that was very much in the mud, right? And so that's a very important thing here for me. Is like they need to be accurate, not just in terms of like what they're wearing, but how they looked. And that's not just how they like what they're wearing, it's how they're like how clean are they, how dirty are they? I mean, the guys should not have beards, and that was one of those things I learned from my photo shoot, but they definitely have stubble. Like they've been fighting for like I don't know, or they've been marching and fighting for like 16 hours by the time the narrative kicks off. So they have 5 o'clock shadows. Like these are
So well, remember
not tidy
The
looking at all.
British Army was considered clean shaven, but that was 3 shaves a week.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
so yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
so yeah, there definitely would be some stubble. Yeah.
Yeah. And so for this here now, I'm talking about the because we do see the Americans. We kind of see them in the fog and stuff when they're firing, and then there's this moment where the camera turns, and then there's this like wall of Americans coming at us, and they've got their bayonets, and the British guys, because of that stupid argument between Latimer and Pike, they don't have their bayonets fixed. So it's one of those like, little moments where like I mean, usually you would have your bayonet fixed, but screw ups happen, right? They happen all the time. There's plenty of times on set where like, well, of course you should have this, and it's like, and yet it isn't ready. It isn't there. And that happens in any organization, right? In any kind of like organized group of men. Like if somebody doesn't do something and things don't get done, and then what that was supposed to prevent kicks off, well, you're kind of screwed because now you're on the back foot and you're trying to scramble and deal with the situation because you don't have what you need ready. And in military affairs, I'm pretty sure that's a pretty brutal situation to be in that you don't have the weapons you need to fight the fight that you're in now. And for the redcoats in the narrative, they should have their bayonets on. Pike wants to put their bayonets on. He's like, "Why the hell aren't we putting bayonets on?" And Latimer's like, "That doesn't look nice." And then they get swamped. And so that moment where the Americans are coming towards them, that'll be a that'll be quite a dramatic shift, I think, in that until then we've been showing projectiles hitting the men and the reactions of that, and now it's suddenly man to man. And I know that historically, like those kind of like bayonet fights didn't happen that much, and in a lot of the cases, maybe like scaring the other unit into flight. But they did happen, just not as much as, say, the Patriot would make you think, where every battle is decided by gladiatorial context. But for this, it's important that we go from like ranged killing to close in killing. And so we don't see the Americans really until suddenly they're in your face. And I think that helps kind of motivate why Kelly just runs. Because when I was writing it and I was thinking about it, I was like, yeah, somebody coming at me with a big ass rifle with a foot and a half spiky thing on the end of it, and I don't have one. It's like, it's going to be hard to win. Yeah,
Hmm.
you can. I think it's that fight or flight thing where animals and we're animals. We can make instant decisions, right? Am I going to survive? Like, do I have a chance? And that's the point of discipline, to make you think that you have a chance, that you can find a way, that you can win, that your training will somehow help you in some way, shape, or form. But Kelly is not somebody that maybe the training has really sunk in. Like he doesn't really believe in himself as a soldier. Pike does. Matthews does. Boswell does. Latimer doesn't. Well, Latimer's dead by this point. But Kelly, he no. And so a wall of steel coming at him, like to him personally, that's where the audience should at this point go like, yeah, I can see why he runs. And without it being kind of overtly said, I wanted to be clear that the Americans suddenly being in your face is an inflection point for Kelly. And this also goes back to the reenactors, and that a lot of reenactors, I think even yourself, like you've been dressed as Americans. Like
Hmm.
there's not a lot of American, reenactors. Like there's not a lot of Canadians who dress as American infantrymen. So we'll have to redress a bunch of people, shoot that almost as a separate shot. A bunch of my stunts guys will be in that stuff, and it'll be its own special headache. But I love it. That's why I'm here. So there we go. And this is a cultural note. This one is kind of important for me because and I've had these discussions already on online. I'm running Facebook ads, and every now and then I'll get comments on them about the indigenous aspect, and they're very fair comments. I mean, the battle is set in the Battle of Lundy's Lane, and pretty much every battle in the War of 1812 had indigenous units. But the as it says here in the description, it's as the indigenous warriors moved about the battlefield at will, they were mobile and free to avoid danger. This implies a very different style of story blocking and camera work. It kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, in that if you can leave, the drama falls away. There's somebody charging at you. There's a whole bunch of cannons firing at you. You can, as an indigenous warrior, you can back off, right? You can go into the woods, get out of range, like you're free to move. I mean, it wasn't total chaos. You had to stay in your group, but they weren't bunched up like you can see down there
No,
in the
they're you
for
read
the Battle of
their
England.
depictions of the British Army. They said like incredibly brave men, but fighting in stupid
Yeah,
formations. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And yet, for what, the army had to do, like, well, that's the only way you can maximize firepower. Like, if you want to get maximum effect at one point, you have to get the maximum amount of rifles into one physical space. So you have to jam everybody together. You got to keep them there, and they got to keep firing. For the indigenous warriors, it was about maneuvering. It wasn't about, massed firepower. And it was just totally different types of fighting, which is why for this film, I've deliberately not shown any indigenous warriors. Not because I have no respect for that, but because that's not the story. And there's also the aspect that as an Irishman, I don't know indigenous history in Canada. Like I know Irish history, I know, European history, but I don't know enough about indigenous history here, and I really don't feel comfortable describing something that I haven't spent time learning about properly. I mean, I could and I would love to. It just hasn't something that I've been able to do at this point in time.
I
And
don't I don't recall them having a prominent role at Lundy's Lane. Well, like at
no, they were
Chippewa, at
yeah,
Queenston, yeah, but
yeah,
not so much Lundy's Lane, right? So
yeah, exactly. They were. I've heard the phrase that they were kind of not burnt out, but that they were spent as a kind of a battle force.
well, Chippewa preceded Lundy's Lane,
Hmm.
and what happened at Chippewa in the British right, there was woods, and
Yeah.
you had light infantry and indigenous warriors from both sides fighting there.
Hmm.
And so then you had warriors from the Six Nations fighting each other. So it became
Yeah.
like almost like a civil war. And
Mhm.
I've heard it said that was so horrifying from them that they consciously withdrew from a lot of the fighting after that, because they were,
Yeah, because you're just pawns at that point, right?
yeah,
Like
they're fighting family on family, right?
yeah,
So
yeah. And again, there's that thing, like there's no one there to discipline them and force them back into the fight. It's like they're making decisions kind of socially, right? As family units, as groups, as tribes. But in the units, you're not making decisions. The decisions are being made for you, and you are obeying them. And that's the whole point. And that works, right? If you're, as a nation state, if you need to get maximum firepower onto a certain point, well, that's how you do it, right? There's no other way around that. If you're a social unit, like a tribe, and your objective is the survival of your tribe, and you're fighting against people who you've maybe been friendly with before, or who you don't view with, say, hate, or you view as kind of like other indigenous people, and then you realize like we're just killing each other and we're not getting anything out of it. Why are we doing this? But this now starts to get into where I'm talking about indigenous motivations, and I don't know enough. So I've decided quite specifically and overtly to not touch on that. Stay focused to these guys in the red coats in the line. Never pull the camera further back, so all we ever see is them, and avoid touching on something I don't know, something I don't understand fully, and something I'm not like, educated in fundamentally. I really feel that the indigenous warriors, their story should be told by somebody who knows it like really at grassroots level. I've always felt that the Last of Mohicans did a really great job of that. Like I mean, I'm not indigenous, so I don't really know, but for me, um, I felt a strong difference in that film between the indigenous experience and the army experience. And for the coward, I'm focusing just on the army experience. Keep it simple, keep it focused, stay to what I know. And like, I mean, not military or anything like that. I'm not from the past, but I definitely know more about the British Army than I do about the Six Nations.
yeah,
And so that's kind of the last thing really. And then there's the thank you. Um, but so yeah, so I mean the film, it's there's I think every kind of director and writer, you're bringing elements of yourself into the film, into whatever it is that you're writing. And for me, for Kelly, there's a very strong sense with him of homesickness. When I moved over here, I didn't get homesick per se, but I very much left all my social circle behind. Um, and I was kind of starting anew, which is, nice and all, but I definitely felt that severance, right? And for Kelly, that's amplified by the battle. He's on his own, and I have been homesick. I was in Hamburg in Germany when I was like I think 18, 17, 18, with my brother, and we're there all summer. And then at some point, I don't know. Homesickness is it's like an addiction. It's like once it gets its claws into you, there's no real negotiating with it. Like I was done. I had another month left to spend there, and I was done. And I just had to get on the plane. I wasn't able to see past that, and it very much hits you at your core. And for me, that experience has never gone away, and I'm able to look at it objectively now. But I remember that very, very vividly. And so for when I came over to Ireland, or when I came over to Canada, it wasn't, it didn't come back, but I was definitely reminded of it. And so that was maybe the germ of like what motivates this guy. And then layered onto that was the experience of meeting reenactors. And then the memories and the experience of seeing what a cannonball can do to a piece of metal with the guy inside it from the museum. And just those three things maybe kind of tie together into what this will become. And so the Kelly, when he runs, it's not just that he's scared, it's that he has no rooted kind of he's not. he has no footing, whereas Matthews, by contrast, does. Matthew is not homesick because he's at home, right? He's in his homeland. Kelly is not, and he has to decide, is this his ho new homeland? And the history of Irish people going back from like once they went overseas and coming back is like very minimal. I mean, not very few did, right? So it's like going to Mars basically back then. You cross the Atlantic and well, that's it. Bye bye home.
No, travel wasn't that easy back in this time period either, right?
No,
And
no.
prohibitively expensive. So,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. All right, maybe stop sharing screen and then we'll
sure,
wrap this up. So we'll make you a little more prominent.
sure. Okay.
So if people have an interest in your project, how can they learn more and how can they support your project?
Well, I've built a website. It's thecoward1812.com, and there's also a Facebook page, which is facebook.com/thecoward1812. There's a newsletter you can sign up for. And like I said, I've been running some ads, so you might see those ads pop up. Do click on them. It'll bring you to the website, sign up for the newsletter, and it's a monthly. Yeah, I don't spam. I have no time for that. But I do send out a monthly letter, and there's one coming out, I think, at the end of this week, maybe around Sunday or Monday. And that'll have some big announcements because we've hit some milestones at last. So that's where you can get the most information. I'm also on Twitter and X or whatever it is, and Instagram. But those things, the website and the Facebook page, that's the main portals. We will be we'll be funding this through Kickstarter. I've gone through the grant process, and that's I mean, it's good for kind of clarifying what it is that you want to do and that you have to explain that to people in written form, but it's also maddening because this is not an easy project to pitch to the Ontario Arts Council or the Canadian Council for the Arts or any of those. And I kind of came to a conclusion after two passes, both rejected, that I'm trying to convince maybe five people in a room that this is a good project. Um, and maybe none of them have any interest in something like this. Maybe none of them have any interest in the time period. Maybe none of them have any interest in period films. Maybe people are turned off by the fact that it's a bunch of white guys fighting a forgotten war, right? Like, it's not an easy thing to pitch. But going with Kickstarter, I'm pitching to people who are already interested in this subject. So, which is why I'm running Facebook ads. I'm identifying people who would be like, well, this is my kind of thing. And they sign up for the newsletter. And now I know that at least you're interested, right? You don't have to sign up for a newsletter. You don't have to visit the website. You don't have to click on the page. But because it is something you're actually interested in, now I know that there's an audience out there. And so instead of trying to convince five people to fund the film for like 75,000, my intention with Kickstarter is to convince 500 people to fund it for 50,000 in total. But I'm only asking for them for like, I don't know, 25, 50, $100, whatever you got. And so I feel that kind of like crowd aspect, that kind of more kind of focusing on a particular community is a lot stronger. So we've shot day one, and that was the stuff at the river, and I'll have a video for that very shortly. And then we're going to run a Kickstarter on the back of that. And that's kind of a proof of concept. That'll come out. We'll probably start the Kickstarter at the end of October. And we'll start it and probably finish in November. And that Kickstarter it'll provide the funding for our shoot in Ireland, because he has a flashback to Ireland, which is just one day. But crucially, it'll provide the funding for prosthetics research and development. Like, how are we going to show cannonballs punching through guys? How are we going to show it again and again and again? Because you have to repeat the gag multiple times. How are we going to show, how are we going to do the fights? How are we going to show all the various things that we cannot figure them out on the day. We have to figure them out months in advance. And that takes time and that takes money. And so once we'll have shot day one, that's done. We'll do the Kickstarter for day two. And then when we go to shoot the battle next year, around the start of the summer, we'll run a second Kickstarter. And that will be on the back of what we've done already. So we're going to layering our funding requests. Instead of going for a hard 100,000, we're going to go for 10,000, 15,000, that kind of thing. And just one moment. Hey, Marie, sorry, I'm just on this podcast. If you can just bail for a second. Sorry, she's just back from the dentist. So that's the intent is a staged Kickstarter process to get to the funding and shooting it in stages instead of going for one large sum and one large shoot. We break it up into parts, and so going to our website and joining the newsletter that will keep people informed of that process, like where we are, how we're doing, what we're achieving, and just kind of like how credible is the project, right? There's a lot of times you see something, it's like, oh, they're trying to do something cool, and it just fades away. And but I've been at this one project maybe 6 years now, and I'm not going away. I'm not giving up.
Well, I admire your resiliency. And then I'll be sure to share the link to your website. Maybe we can
Yeah, thank you. And
get a
like I
graphic
said,
up.
there's a mood video as well, and I'll send you that link. And that's only like 45 seconds, but that takes one shot that we did from our day one of shooting. It's like my favorite shot. And I think without kind of like telling anything really about the story, it really gives you a sense of the mood and the style and the vibe. And I think that'll be really helpful.
All right, excellent. If you can get that stuff to me, then I will work it in as I do my editing. So,
Great. Well, thank you very much for your time, Tom. I appreciate you reaching out. This is great. Thank you. Like
well,
I
I
said, you
appreciate
know,
you coming on, and I've known you and about the project for feels like a couple years now, but I learned a lot more about it. It sounds really exciting. So, thank you for sharing that with us.
yeah, thank you. Yeah. I'm sure once I've done let's say the Ireland shoot and maybe some of the prosthetics work, we can talk again and I can actually show you some stuff and we can play it properly within the thing and you can see maybe start to get a sense of just like how real it's becoming, right? So you'll have to book extra time for that because I won't shut up. I'll just keep talking.
That sounds good. All right. Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you.